I used to think road movies were about getting from point A to point B, but Green Book isn't that kind of story. Here, the road isn't a route, it's an X-ray of the soul. Two men drive through the American South of the early 60s, a place where even the law bends to prejudice. One is loud, brash, and street smart, Tony Vallelonga, or as everyone calls him, Tony Lip. The other is Dr. Don Shirley, a world-class pianist with the posture of a king. And yeah, there's a huge gap between them, cultural, social, and deeply personal. But that same gap will turn into a bridge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, don't let me down. Let's go.
The Green Book was a real guide. It helped black travelers find safe hotels and restaurants in a segregated America. That fact alone says everything. Safety was a privilege, not a right. The film takes that bit of history and turns it into something alive. That's what I love most about Green Book. It takes a textbook fact and makes you feel it. In reality, the guide existed from 1936 to the late 1960s and was vital for traveling through the South. From the very first act, you can tell this isn't just another buddy movie or a feel-good lecture about tolerance. It's a story about human dignity, how people lose it, fight to regain it, and learn to recognize it in someone else. I like to think of it as a two-way road. Tony learns how to listen, and Dr. Shirley learns how to let someone in. They meet in the middle, not because it's the right thing to do, but because without that connection, life starts sounding like a false note.
There you go.
The film's tone is warm, even funny at times. But behind every laugh, there's tension. Every joke hits a wall with a quiet sign saying, "You don't belong here." And when Tony, a guy who barely fits into any rulebook, becomes the only protection for a man in a tuxedo, the film quietly turns the question toward us. What are we willing to do for someone else's dignity when our own isn't on the line? We love to say, "I'm not like that," and nod toward the past like it has nothing to do with us. But Green Book asks a tougher question. Who am I when no one's watching? When the choice is uncomfortable? When doing the right thing isn't a post online, but a 2 a.m. talk with a cop on an empty road? Behind the simple setup are complicated people. Dr. Shirley isn't a saintly victim. He's a man in armor. He's lonely not just because of his skin color, but because he lives between worlds. Too royal for his own, too different for everyone else. Tony isn't a noble savior. He's a guy with biases who still doesn't haggle when someone's dignity is on the line. Out of those rough edges, something real forms, what we end up calling friendship. What's interesting is how differently critics read the film. For some, it's a warm, high-energy story with great performances. They praise the snappy script and the duo's chemistry. For others, it's a simplified reconciliation tale that smooths hard truths for a pleasant aftertaste. Honestly, both takes land. The movie goes down easy, but it still stings right where it should. What matters is that the silk of banquet tablecloths doesn't muffle the squeak of reality. You can still hear it. To me, Green Book isn't a manifesto or a lecture. It's an exercise in empathy. A film that doesn't argue with you. It invites you to sit in the car with two men who, at first, have nothing to say to each other. On the roadmap of the road movie genre, it sketches one takeaway worth keeping. Respect isn't an opinion, it's an action. When Green Book hit theaters in 2018, the world split almost as sharply as the film's two leads. Some called it a beacon of hope in cynical times, others a comforting lie about racism. And honestly, both sides have a point. The New York Times wrote that the film is deeply human, witty, and musical, a reminder to believe in people again. Rolling Stone praised Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen as the best on-screen duo of the decade, highlighting their honesty and chemistry without a trace of sentimentality. Roger Ebert noted how the movie balances humor and morality with surgical precision, never crossing into preaching. But not everyone was charmed. The Guardian, along with several black critics, argued that the film softens the edges, giving white audiences a safe version of discomfort, where racism can be fixed with a few kind gestures and a bucket of fried chicken. IndieWire put it more gently. Green Book isn't about pain. it's about comfort. But sometimes people need comfort before they can face pain. Here's what's fascinating. Director Peter Farrelly, known for comedies like Dumb and Dumber, chose that soft tone on purpose. He said, "I didn't want to shout. I wanted the audience to arrive there on their own, and it worked." The film won the Oscar for Best Picture, but people didn't discuss it like a victory. They discussed it like a conversation. Some called it politically incorrect but honest. Others, simple but sincere. The truth lies somewhere in between. Green Book doesn't pretend to be revolutionary. It doesn't want to change the world. It just wants to wake up empathy. And in that mission, it succeeds better than many important dramas that try to guilt trip their audience. This one doesn't force you to feel bad. It simply makes you feel. That's the movie's paradox, noted in nearly every review. It's simple, but never shallow, like a song with an easy melody and lyrics that quietly hurt. That's why Green Book works. It doesn't accuse, it invites. It doesn't judge, it takes you on the road. I often wonder, why do completely different people sometimes recognize themselves in each other? In Green Book, that's the entire point. Two men, worlds apart, end up being two sides of the same loneliness. Tony is your classic Italian guy from the Bronx. Loud, hot-headed, and brutally direct. His life runs on instinct, humor, and defense. He's learned to be tough, because in his world, weakness is a luxury. He doesn't think about racism, or class, or philosophy. He just takes what he needs and protects his own. But behind that simple mask, there's fear. The fear that if he ever stops being the tough guy, the world will crush him. Dr. Don Shirley is the complete opposite. His world is built on discipline and control. Every gesture is measured, every word calculated. He doesn't allow himself to be vulnerable. His posture, his tone, his perfectly tailored suits, all of it is armor against humiliation, the kind he faces every day, even on stage, while the audience gives him a standing ovation. He's lonely in applause. Tony is lonely in noise. Different silences, same emptiness. When they first end up in the same car, it's not just two strangers on the road. It's a clash of two survival strategies. Tony talks so he doesn't have to hear himself. Shirley stays silent so he doesn't say too much. One hides behind words, the other behind silence. And between them, an entire universe of misunderstanding. At first, their conversations sound like jokes, but they're not really funny. They're tests, small battles for control. When Tony offers Shirley fried chicken and he refuses, the scene plays like comedy.
You want some or not?
No.
Tell me that don't smell good.
Hey, I prefer not to get grease.
Ooh, I'm gonna get grease on my blankie. Come on, take it, eat it.
No.
I'm throwing it in the bag.
Don't you dare.
But underneath it, it's a collision of identities. For Tony, it's real food. For Shirley, it's a stereotype he spent his whole life escaping. That small moment when something harmless suddenly exposes buried pain. That's the heart of the film. Dr. Shirley lives in a tower of loneliness. He doesn't belong anywhere, not to the white world, not to the black one. He's too educated for Harlem's streets and too different for the concert halls of the South. His apartment sits above Carnegie Hall, yet he feels like he's in exile. He's surrounded by beauty, but he's not allowed to be himself. Tony, on the other hand, sits near the bottom of the social ladder. Yet he has something Shirley doesn't, the freedom to be imperfect. He can get angry, curse, laugh, screw up. Nobody expects him to be flawless. Shirley doesn't have that luxury. For him, even the smallest crack in composure would only confirm someone else's prejudice.
What on God's green earth are you doing?
A letter.
Looks more like a piecemeal ransom note.
And out of that pressure grows the film's most beautiful thread: reverse education. It's not a white man teaching a black man how to live. It's the opposite. Shirley teaches Tony to feel, to listen, to respect. And Tony teaches Shirley to let himself be human. Not perfect, just real. To have the right to make mistakes, to fear, to laugh. Critics often said this was a movie about friendship defeating racism. But that's too narrow. It's really about two different kinds of isolation meeting in one car. It's not about equality, it's about vulnerability. and admitting that vulnerability is what finally brings them closer. Farrelly talks about something simpler, how people learn to be human from each other, not through big ideas, but through shared roads, shared meals, shared silence. And maybe that's why this film hits so deeply, because it's not about defeating evil, but about no longer being afraid to be kind.
Says right here, cozy as your own home.
The farther they drive south, the clearer it becomes. They're not moving forward, they're driving back in time. The world they enter is all smiles and polished manners on the surface, but underneath, it's rotting. A showcase of politeness hiding a basement full of fear, hate, and a centuries-old habit of dividing people into us and them. For Tony, it's a shock. Sure, he'd heard about racism, but it's one thing to hear stories, and another to watch a man be denied dinner in the same restaurant where he just played a sold-out concert. Dr. Shirley plays with elegance and genius. The crowd stands, applauding him, until the maitre d' steps in and says, "I'm sorry, sir, but you can't dine here."
This gentleman says that I'm not permitted to dine here.
I'm sorry, but it is the policy of the restaurant.
It's not a scene about racism in your face, it's about the absurd power of habit. And in that silence, the audience doesn't just see Shirley's pain, they see Tony's shame. For the first time, he realizes that his down-to-earth worldview was actually a form of privilege. Up to this point, Tony believed everything could be fixed, with fists, charm, or street smarts. But here, none of that works. You can't negotiate injustice when it's built into the foundation. And in that moment, something inside him shifts. He stops feeling pity and starts feeling respect. He watches Shirley refuse to shout, refuse to beg, just lift his head and walk away. And that quiet dignity hits harder than any fight ever could. Later, the arrest. A cop sneers at Tony.
Why are you driving him?
That line, casual, almost teasing, is the perfect summary of an era.
You half a yourself.
Tony explodes, throws insults, gets thrown into a cell, and then comes the twist. It's not Tony who saves them, it's Shirley. He makes a phone call to the governor, and within minutes, they're released.
I goddamn tell you to do it, and I'm telling you to get him the goddamn out.
Who the hell would you call?
That single moment flips their dynamic. The bodyguard is no longer the protector. He's the one being protected, from his own ignorance. This is the first scene where the balance of power shifts. It's no longer about strength, it's about dignity and control. Many reviewers, including Roger Ebert and Variety, called this part of the film's most honest thread, because it doesn't glorify the struggle. It shows the small victories that survival is made of. Sometimes that victory is simply staying calm when someone tries to humiliate you. Sometimes it's refusing to sink to their level. One of the most powerful moments comes when he sits at that out-of-tune piano. No one's listening, no one cares, but he plays because he has to. It's an act of rebellion without slogans, without an audience. He's not performing for others, he's reminding himself who he is. And in that quiet, he becomes the freest man in the film. For Tony, it's a revelation. His whole life, he's measured worth by what's useful. Who wins, who pays, who's right. But now he sees someone who does something not for applause, but because it's how his soul breathes. And for the first time, Tony is silent, not awkward, respectful. The South becomes more than geography. It's a trial for them both. Tony learns to see depth. Shirley learns to let someone near. Together they start to experience what humanity really means. Not perfection, but shared imperfection. This isn't just a road through America. It's a road through prejudice. Every stop peels away another layer of truth. Dr. Don Shirley. It's easy to admire him on paper. 3 PhDs, a world-class pianist, a man who's performed in the most prestigious halls across the globe. But the film shows, with painful honesty, that the higher he climbed, the farther he drifted from everyone else. He doesn't belong anywhere. White audiences adore him on stage but won't share a table with him afterward. Black communities see him as a stranger, too white, too refined, too distant. He speaks like a professor, drinks wine instead of whiskey, and lives in a literal tower above Carnegie Hall. He's alone, even among his own. That loneliness isn't a pose, it's a shield. He's built a world of perfection around himself so no one can see the pain underneath. He can't afford to be simply human because society has never granted him the right to make mistakes. He must be the perfect black man, flawless, composed, just to be considered worthy of the stage. Every note, every phrase he plays isn't just music. It's a declaration. I'm not less than you. I'm better. And that's the tragedy. Because behind that better lies deep exhaustion. He's not living, he's proving. The most powerful moment in the film comes when he stumbles into the rain, broken, screaming at Tony.
So if I'm not black enough, and if I'm not white enough, and if I'm not man enough, then tell me, Tony, what am I?
It's not just an emotional breakdown, it's the cry of a man who's lost all coordinates. He belongs nowhere. He's not angry, he's empty. His elegance, his distance, his pride, none of it is arrogance. It's defense against shame. That scene changes everything between them. Tony finally sees him, not as a proud musician, but as a man who spent his life trying to earn the right to belong. And Shirley, for the first time, sees Tony not as a loudmouth, but as someone who knows how to stand by another person without judgment. Critics often called this the film's emotional core. As IndieWire put it, Farrelly isn't filming race. He's filming invisible walls between people and the quiet terror of realizing you built them yourself. Here, music stops being performance. It becomes confession. He plays not to impress, but to soothe. And for the first time, his armor cracks. Tony says nothing. He just sits beside him. Two men who can't express feelings finally share silence. And that silence becomes the beginning of friendship. This chapter isn't about the home Shirley had. It's about the home he never found. Not a place on the map, but a state of being, where you're accepted without a but. He searched for belonging his whole life and found not a house, but a road. Not an audience, but a friend. And maybe that's the answer to every argument about whether Green Book is too soft or too simple. It's not a film about racism as a system. It's about loneliness, how it corrodes even the most gifted soul, and how empathy, not ideology, can heal what intellect and success never could. After weeks on the road, hundreds of miles, cheap motels, and countless quiet talks, they finally head back to New York. Outside, snow and light. Inside, silence. But it's not the same silence as before. Back then, it divided them. Now it connects them. Tony drives, saying nothing, but his eyes are softer. He doesn't see Shirley as the job anymore. And Shirley sits beside him. No tuxedo, no armor, just calm. For the first time, he looks free, like a man who doesn't owe the world anything anymore. And that's the beauty of the film's final contrast. On the surface, nothing's happening. Just two men driving home. But inside, everything has changed. It's the quiet end of an era for both of them.
Tony, wake up. Get inside.
Tony turns to him and says,
Wait, come up, me and my family.
At the start, Tony threw away glasses after black workers drank from them. Now he's inviting a black man to his family's Christmas table. Not as a guest, as a friend. Shirley hesitates. He smiles politely and walks away. He returns to his elegant tower above Carnegie Hall. The room is silent. Everything looks perfect, but it's hollow. And in that moment, it hits him. Dignity isn't a home if there's no warmth inside. He stands up, puts on his coat, and walks back out into the snow. Silence. They just look at each other. Tony steps forward and says,
Doc. Oh, welcome.
That's it. No speeches, just a quiet breath of relief, like two people finally stopped pretending. Shirley sits down at the table, awkward, cautious, but finally among people. And then comes laughter. Simple, real, human. No walls, no titles, just people.
Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Donald Shirley.
It's not a happy ending. It's reconciliation, a moment where humanity outweighs color, class, and pride. That's why it feels so powerful. It's not grand, it's real. As the camera slowly rises and snow falls outside the window, you realize the road has ended. But both men finally found a home. Not a place, but a feeling. Here, Green Book stops being a road movie or a biopic. It becomes a parable, not about racism, not about travel, but about the small victories of empathy, where once it was me and him, now it's simply us. When Green Book came out in 2018, the world was already different, skeptical, tired of moral lessons, and of movies where good always wins. And maybe that's why this small story, about two men learning to understand each other, hit like an emotional explosion. Peter Farrelly's film is one of those rare cases where simplicity doesn't mean shallowness. It doesn't preach. It talks to you, quietly, like a conversation over dinner. No moral slogans, no grand speeches, just a reminder that being human doesn't require ideology. Critics called it an anti-cynical film, a story that restored faith in empathy in an age where kindness was mistaken for weakness. As the New York Times wrote, it's not a movie about racism, it's a movie about learning to listen. The real magic of Green Book lies in how it refuses to put its characters on opposite sides. It's not the educated man teaching the worker, and not the black man enlightening his white friend. It's a two-way exchange. Tony learns to think, Shirley learns to feel, and both become more than they were. The film shows that dignity isn't found in winning. It's in changing. You don't have to be a saint to grow. Sometimes a single small step is enough. A step that breaks a wall, even if it's just between two people. This is a film about tiny shifts, about how humor, awkwardness, and shared meals can reveal something eternal. When Tony writes letters to his wife under Shirley's dictation, it's not just about grammar. It's a metaphor for friendship. One gives words, the other gives heart. And maybe that's the film's greatest secret. It's honesty. It never tries to sound important. It just is. And in that quiet sincerity lies what our modern world so often lacks: genuine warmth. Green Book reminds us that goodness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just offering someone a seat at your table. Sometimes it's driving them home. Sometimes it's simply listening, even if you don't fully understand. This isn't a story about one man saving another. It's about two people saving humanity in each other. That's why it won the Oscar, not for political correctness, but because it restored something we'd almost forgotten: faith in friendship, respect, laughter, warmth, and shared silence. Humanity is warmth and presence. The film doesn't argue. It simply shows us that in a world full of noise and division, the most radical act is to be kind. And maybe that's why Green Book will stay timeless. Not because it speaks of the past, but because it reminds us of a future where humanity still has a chance. If we keep looking at each other not from above, not from afar, but eye to eye. You know, sometimes the strongest stories aren't about heroes. They're about people, the ones who simply decide one day to be a little kinder than life expects them to be. When I first saw Green Book, I didn't think it would stay with me. It seemed simple, maybe too simple. But over time, I realized what I kept remembering wasn't the music or the road trip. It was the silence between two men who finally started to listen to each other. And maybe that's where humanity is born, not in grand gestures, not in protests or speeches, but in the moment when you choose not to judge, not to turn away, but to understand. We live in an age where everyone wants to be right, but fewer people want to be kind. And Farrelly's film reminds us, being right doesn't save anyone. Kindness does. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't make you a saint. It just makes the world around you a little softer. And that's enough. Green Book isn't a film about America in the 60s. It's a film about us, about people still afraid to be real, about how hard it is to lower your guard, how scary it feels to say, "I understand you," and how important it is to say it anyway. Maybe humanity isn't about who you are, but about who you invite to sit at your table. And if one day, after a long road, you come home and hear someone quietly say, "I'm glad you came," know this: you're already there, in the only place that truly matters. A place called home.